Come join Libby, Molly, and Tiffany, the ladies of Consignment Chats, where we talk about all things consignment.
Welcome to episode 14 of Consignment Chats. Hey, ladies.
Hi.
Today, we're going to talk about the difference between online and storefront. There's a lot of great positives and negatives in both, drawbacks, advantages, all that good stuff in both. But your typical model for consignment is brick and mortar. I think now with all the crazy times we've been in, all these uncertain times with what's been going on in everyone's life, we've talked about maybe a lot of people doing hybrid might be the best option altogether. But what we plan to do today is take the time and break down both and the positive negatives of both. So we're going to start with Libby because Libby has had a brick and mortar, and we're going to have her begin and break down how she started her business and kind of the ups and downs of the storefront and then her transition into online. So Libby, get us started today.
Yeah, how cool. So I know some of you have heard this before, but I'm just going to tell you, I started in a brick and mortar and we were there for 3 years. And in parallel to the brick and mortar, what we did was we started an online business. We were selling online. So we kind of did have a hybrid model. The brick and mortar far outweighed the online business. At the end of 3 years, because of some lease situations, I was forced to find a new spot. And I thought, all right, well, let's just keep the online business running. It was awesome that we had that going the whole time. So once we dedicated our time and effort, we were able to just go solely online and never went back to the brick and mortar, which was, really a business saver at that point. Like, it wasn't how I anticipated things working, but it was nice to have both. And then, when I no longer had the storefront, the online business was able to sustain us. And actually, we did better, just solely concentrating on that. So that's kind of the point at which I'm coming from in regard to the brick and mortar and storefront, and why I think hybrid, if you do have a storefront, is an awesome option. Even if you start small and just have a little online running, I think it's great to have, because as we're seeing these days, right? Like,
You never know.
Like, a lot of consignment stores, I think we're kind of struggling to hurry up, get online. We see some people doing some amazing live sales in conjunction with their brick and mortar businesses. So that's really neat to see, like, all the online consignment kind of picking up right now. So I want to talk a little bit about the brick and mortar and some of the benefits of brick and mortar. And I do want to briefly mention Sarah Marshall. She's the Four Corners of Consignment. That is her business. She's a consultant for brick and mortar stores, and she is just an absolute wealth of knowledge she concentrates just on brick and mortar stores.
And we'll link her on here.
Yeah, we'll link her up in the show, and we're having her on next month. She's going to be, we're going to do an interview with her. So that's going to be really interesting. And so, okay, some of the benefits of having a brick and mortar store. You have a physical presence. I feel like you automatically have credibility as a business. That is a little harder to build, as we're going to discuss with an online store. Like, you automatically, when you have that storefront, you have credibility. People know you're there. They know you're a business. They kind of know what you do without having to, broadcast it or do social media and all of that. And one of the other things is it's much easier to build personal relationships with people when you're in a storefront and you're face to face with those consigners. Much easier to build relationships. You have to work a little bit harder otherwise. The other thing is foot traffic. You don't have that with an online model. You do not have foot traffic. So, that's something to consider. The other thing that I think is a real benefit of having a brick and mortar store is your consigners can easily become your shoppers. And you see a lot of that crossover with the brick and mortar model. It is a little bit more difficult to achieve that. I'm not saying you can't achieve that with an online store, but it's a little more difficult. It's a little more difficult. Like, when you're taking consignments in in a brick and mortar store, those people are generally, shopping or,
Walking around.
chatting,
Yeah.
and you're developing those relationships. So, one other thing that we came up with that was a benefit is the ability to process consignments on the spot. So when you're online, you can't always do that. Like when you walk into a brick and mortar, a lot of times there's somebody there to receive your items. They go through them. They might hand you back what they can't take. They might answer questions, and that with online is really a challenge. So that is definitely a benefit of the brick and mortar store, just kind of that whole thing. So
that's a very good point.
Yeah. Just things what I didn't, it was funny because you don't really think about them in those terms. But having the hindsight now to see that, I see the things that are a little more challenging with the just an online model. Some of the drawbacks of having the brick and mortar are, the overhead is obviously going to be quite a bit higher. And with that, I'm kind of including staffing. It's very, very difficult to run it without a good staff and a couple people. And I think that goes for most consignment stores. I would say it's nearly impossible to run it with one person. Online, you can kind of scale up or scale back, and you don't have the consideration of that as much. The other thing is customer service. You have to be there to provide the customer service at you're at your store hours, at your given store hours. And, that can be tough. And that also ties into setting the store hours. Like you're open from, 9 to 5, let's just say 9 to 5, you're open from 9 to 5. You need to be there. Somebody needs to physically be in that store from 9 to 5.
Not much flexibility on that.
Yep.
Yeah, there's not much you can do. If you're open, you're open. The other thing would be displays. Like when you have I know this is fun for a lot of people, so maybe it's not a total drawback. For me, it's a total drawback. Is, you have to display your items in an appealing manner. And, you're putting up displays, you're making sure things look great, they're appealing, which is different than the online model. You photograph and you store.
I want to speak a little bit on that because I worked for you in the storefront and had fun doing the floor sets. That was like one of my things, was resetting the furniture and the displays. And of the people that worked for us, like I think about Emily, and even the kids in the neighborhood would come after school and go, "Can I dress a mannequin?" They love to do that. And it was fun. And sometimes we would do contests and name them and, have all these fun, creative things to do with our mannequins. But the beauty of that, like you're saying, it allowed you to highlight pieces, where in a online store, then, and here's why I'm speaking, because this is now my job now with you in doing social media, is trying to figure out ways to not allow those items to get lost in a website, because I can't make this beautiful display in the storefront window or on the, setup when you come in the door. So it is different, but creativity people like both, I have to say. I enjoy both. But,
all right, so let's throw that in a positive and a negative, depending on who you are and what you like.
And it is more difficult, I think, online. I am going to say that it is more difficult online because the creativity is limited. But
well, I managed the store for a while. It was not a consignment shop, but it was a retail store, and I loved doing the displays.
Yeah.
But I would get lost in that. Like you can easily lose a couple hours of your schedule just, rearranging things and doing stuff. And I was like, I have other things I got to do because I'm the manager. So,
I would do full floor sets that would take the entire day. I mean, because it was the entire store of furniture, clothes, you do the full thing, and it was like a full day and then a chiropractor visit the next day. Right. But I had muscle back then, right? Like we were talking about, we had muscle. Like
I always think about that. I'm so weak now.
There's the problem.
We'd be like moving furniture every day.
There's a drawback, y'all. A drawback to online is you don't get the muscle build that you get in a storefront.
My store had a front porch, so we literally had to drag we had to drag all the stuff out to the front porch every day, set it all up, and then drag it all back in every day.
Drag it all back in.
So I was like, yes, I got exercise that doing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last I think drawback of having the brick and mortar would be that your customers are limited to your geographical area, right? So you're in a certain town, that's your customer base. So you definitely have a smaller customer base if you're just a brick and mortar store. And something to
That's a great breakdown. Oh, yep. Go ahead, Tiffany.
I just have one more thing to add to a drawback
Sure.
that we didn't write down is advertising, because it's all on you to advertise, to get your name out in that neighborhood, in that city, whatever town. Like, it's all on you. Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
good
absolutely.
point. So that's a great breakdown of the brick and mortar, and it probably will spur a lot of comments and conversation in the future on this video, but also in our community group. Tiffany, since you are a fully online business with your business, why don't you take a minute and let's break down the online side of it? And we did a little bit of that, kind of crosses over with what Libby did, but the online benefits and drawbacks. You want to start us off there?
Okay. Well, the biggest benefit, I think, is low overhead. You don't have to pay that rent or, the building fee and cleaning, all sorts of stuff, staffing. The staffing can be virtual, like you guys, you can both work in separate states on the same business. I have a friend that helps me, and I rarely see her. I see her maybe once or twice a month, but she's always working every day. And of course the hours, you can work anytime you want. It's easier to take vacation and time off and holidays and be with your family. I know when I had managed the store that I did, it was really difficult if I planned to not work a weekend, but then suddenly someone called in sick or didn't show up. Then all of a sudden I'm working on the weekend.
It's on you. Yeah.
When your husband works a 9 to 5, and of course you have kids in school, they're home on the weekends. You want to be home on the weekends, but you have to go in all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I realized quickly that retail, in a building, retail was not for me because of the schedule. Like lots of evenings and weekends is, where you have to be, which sometimes can work out with your family life, depending on your family life. But for me, it just did not work out.
Yeah.
The items, everything, all your inventory can be stored more efficiently, and it can be ready to ship. That's why I do mine. I prepackage all mine up in advance, and it's ready to go. And this is what I love is you have a virtually unlimited pool of customers worldwide.
Yeah.
Or, your platform, like I mentioned about the advertising, your platform does not the advertising for you. We do social media in addition to that, but you don't have to even do social media because the platforms do that for you. You can pay to have your items promoted online, and so they'll advertise them. And my favorite thing is the flexibility of inventory for seasons. Like I can list. I mean, can we talk about the Halloween stuff?
I think we should.
Yes, this is where we need to talk about it.
I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but I know that I have sold a lot of Halloween since Halloween. And
you were selling it at Christmas, weren't you?
Yes. I just sold 2 things this week. One was a costume. I mean, who knew? People will buy, they look for that stuff year round, and they can't get it in a regular brick and mortar store because the brick and mortar stores, how they turn over for seasons early.
Yeah. Like
3 or 4, 6 months sometimes ahead of time. They're got Christmas now, right? One story I told the ladies earlier is I love to sleep with a fan. When that fan breaks in the winter, you cannot walk into Walmart and buy a fan, but you can go on eBay and find a fan.
Yeah.
So I mean, just things like that. I just love that.
Tiffany is dropping some good knowledge here. One of the things we hear and see all the time on Facebook and different selling groups is, I'm going to hold on to these items and post them like right before the holiday. And our advice is no, list it as soon as you get it. People they can't find it in the store. The only option they have is to go online and look for it. So list those items out of season.
They could be traveling.
That's what I was going to say. Nick and I are cruisers. So, granted, let's take COVID, let's take the pandemic out of the picture and go back a couple of years ago. Nick and I love to go on cruises. And sometimes that could be in January. Well, I can't go here in January to the mall and get cruise apparel. It's not going to happen, but I can go online and get it.
Yep.
So, yeah.
I mean, people are traveling all the time. I mean, well, they were, but we're going to Australia for Christmas and need a swimsuit. I mean, I don't know. So I love that.
Very good point. Very good point.
So the drawbacks are no physical presence to lend to credibility. You don't get the foot traffic from the town or the street or whatever that you're on. It's harder to convert consigners to shoppers, as Libby was saying. The processing of items, well, you do that pretty much on your own time, whenever. But if something's bad, then you have to get it back to the person. Like, you don't often do that in front of the person,
right?
Things like that. And the storage space, you have to consider that if you have the space in your home to store things. I mean, I went through that. I filled a whole bedroom, and then I decided I outgrew the bedroom, and we had to buy a shed and put in the backyard, and I had to move everything out there. And that's the whole process. And now the shed is full. So,
it doesn't take
I don't really have anywhere else to go.
The shed's going to have to get a twin, and you're going to have a she shed and a he shed.
We already have that because we had the old shed first. So
I'm running into that here too. The storage, that is something somebody really needs to consider when going online, is how to storage, because we all have different home situations, and we are going to do some side videos of our storage to show the different solutions we've come up with, because we all have very different situations with that. And Libby, you talk about your storage in your episode with Holly, episode 12. So you can listen to her breakdown of storage there too. But you have to think about that, especially if you live in an apartment, not a home. We have people in our community group for Consignment Chats, one in particular who just rented a studio space that she's working on getting herself in there. It won't be a storefront, but it will be where she stores her items and does her photography and works from. So you do have to consider all of that. It does move into your home and into your family life. For sure.
It does.
The last drawback is the learning curve may be steeper. I mean, I know a lot of people are afraid of jumping on eBay or whatever it is, learning it. But that's what we're here for, to help you. And we have episodes about that. And it's not that there's lots of information out there about how to get started.
Yeah, there is. And there's so many of this. I feel like we could even go more and more and we will in our community. And speaking of community, y'all, did anybody have anything to add on this as we broke it all down? Because I know we've been busy in our community, and I think Tiffany's got some things to share over there because we've had a lot of chatter going on. Tiffany, what's been going on over there?
Well, I want to congratulate Michelle with Salvage Garden because she actually bought a storefront.
That's so exciting.
Yeah. So exciting. And she asked a question. She put a picture of her building on our community group, and she asked a question. She said, I just bought my own store to start my consignment business. I'm hoping to also have local artists and crafters displayed. Do you have any other vendors in your store? I'm debating running them as a consignment as well versus renting out shelf space or for a set amount. Any thoughts or input on this?
And she did get a lot of feedback, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. Yes.
That's great.
So, if you have questions like that, our Facebook community group is a great place to ask those questions and get
absolutely.
And we have another one that Lydia just found. It said, hi, I just found your Facebook group and YouTube. I have 10 plus years on eBay, but I haven't sold in about 2 years. Did some consignment, probably about 5 to 10 jobs. Someone approached me recently with 1,400 vintage movie magazines to be sold individually. I'd like to jump back in, and I'm working on revamping my consignment agreement / fees, etc. I haven't had time to listen to videos 6 and 9. That's where we talk about terms and consignment, by the way.
Mhm.
But wondering if outside of that, do you all have any suggestions for me with this size lot? I would definitely hire someone to get it done quickly. Thanks so much.
Wow. Good for her.
Yeah.
That's interesting stuff. And that's kind of stuff you definitely want to get out online because you get a bigger group of people. Talking about hiring somebody reminds me, Libby, when we were talking about the online part, about the virtual assistant.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's something somebody like that could look into that we didn't discuss what the PA is.
Yep. I mean, we have used virtual assistants before. So basically you go onto, let's say, I'm going to use an example. There's Hammock, there's FreeUp, there's a number of Fiverr, there's a number of websites, and there's just independent contractors. You type in what you need, you type in what you're willing to pay, and, you get bids on the job. And so that's always an option. If you have like a task, you can easily define, and it's probably like, I generally use it for repetitive tasks. That's probably something you want to look into.
Yeah, that would be
on
a
contract basis. So you're not hiring somebody, you're just, paying them for a specific job. So that's,
it's a great resource for people to know who
are
are doing it on their own and might even just have 1 week that they get overwhelmed and go, I need help just for a couple of weeks. So yeah. So Tiffany,
there's a lot of people that use them for sharing on Poshmark.
Yeah. I think that would be a great place because it's such a social selling platform that takes time away from what you might need to do more in your business. So that's a good idea. Tiffany, were there any other things in the community to share?
Well, we have this nice little comment, just a nice comment that someone wrote us, that from Samantha wrote us, and she said, I'm currently on listing number 8 in 2 hours. This is a lot for me, and I'm very excited. I'm sad that I will soon catch up on your podcast episodes, since right now they are what's keeping me going. Thank you for starting your podcast. I've been starving for this exact content for years. Thanks.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's great.
And I can't even tell you, when I read that, I even got a little choked up because
I am now.
Right.
Yeah.
It's
nice to know that
going. I mean, it's so nice to hear when somebody, says something like that, because sometimes you're putting this out there in the world and you're talking, but when you're recording, you have no audience. So like that feedback is really just amazing to have.
It is. It's inspiring.
And that's why I brought up the idea to Libby in the first place, to give consignment sellers something out there that I wasn't finding myself.
Right. Yeah.
And clearly it was a good idea.
Clearly.
Very good idea. Very good idea.
Yeah. So if anybody wants to, I'm just going to ask, sorry, Molly.
No, go ahead.
If anybody wants to go on Apple Podcasts on iTunes and leave us a review, that's a great way to get us out there and kind of build us in search. So, if you can take the time to do that, it's really appreciated. It helps us more than you can imagine. So thank you.
And click that subscribe button on YouTube.
Yeah.
Join us. Yeah. So if you guys really enjoy hanging out and chatting with us, we know we enjoy it. Clearly, we do it every week. And you want to find all the different ways to connect with us, head on over to consignmentchats.com. And that will link you up to all of our social media, all the ways to follow us and keep up with what we're doing. And until next week, ladies, cheers.
Cheers.
Look, Tiffany, it's my lipstick side.
You have to keep that side hidden. Mine's over here.
Thanks for joining Libby, Molly, and Tiffany, the ladies of Consignment Chats, as we talked about all things consignment. To learn more and keep chatting, find Consignment Chats on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, and Instagram.